Hi, friends. Welcome once again to this space. We have the visit of someone that has been here before. He's the booker owner of Revolution for Wrestling in the UK. Welcome, Andy Quildan, Mr. Andy Q. Thanks to being here.
Thanks for having me back.
Yes, Kanji!
Okay, a lot has happened since the last time we spoke, but I think there are some key events or development that led us to where we are right now at RevPro. So we wanted to do some questions to you. We are celebrating the 13th anniversary show in a few weeks, and there's a lot of buzzing around the show because of an announcement that you have been doing the last few days. Many big matches, and there's also one big show that returns this year earlier compared to last. So, are you ready for some questions?
Whatever you've got, throw them my way and I'll answer the best I can.
Thank you so much. So, first, I would like to highlight Epic Encounter in March. There were some results that started getting things in motion, in my opinion. So, we had CPF, returning and reaffirming as a team in RevPro. We had RKJ defeating JJ Gale. We had the Young Guns winning the British Tag Team titles. We had Will Caven defending the Cruiserweight Championship. We had Kanji defeating Dion Apurazo, one big name from the world stage. And we had Michael Oku retaining against One Commanders, who, for people that remember, that's the first interview we did last year. You also named Manders as someone to look forward, both in RevPro and the European scene. This was also the first of many major events that RevPro will have in Wolverhampton. If I'm not wrong, this was the first time that you had a show in Wolverhampton. So, could this be considered a turning point in RevPro programming, or do you think that maybe there's something, or a different show or a different event that start to get things in motion? And how was the experience of this first show in Wolverhampton?
So it was, I guess it's kind of a two-part question. But yeah, it was a very important show for us to essentially open another door in terms of the hangar in Wolverhampton as being a new venue. Of course, long-term British wrestling fans will remember it from the Fight Club pro shows back in the day, and of course some more recently OTT shows. I think one of the things the venue was synonymous with was obviously I always used to get great crowds, but whether or not they were as invested in the wrestling, a lot of the time the crowds were there to have a good time. There's nothing wrong with that, but the investment in terms of what was going on in the ring. So, of course, our product is more traditional in the sense that all the focus is on the ring. So it was great to be able to kind of bring our shows there and to be able to see that there was a level of investment with everything which was going on. Of course, I've been very outspoken when talking about how expensive it is to run professional wrestling shows in London at the moment. And it's not cheap to run shows in Wolverhampton, but it's competitively priced compared to London, where it seems like everything is moving in the direction of just trying to almost get medium and small size promoters out of the buildings, which is kind of crazy when you think about kind of where these venues are at the moment in terms of, the economy's struggling, everyone's struggling for money. And I appreciate the costs for everything has gone up, but obviously at the bottom line of it all is, unless we can put on product for people to then invest in, then A, we can't fill the building up, and B, you're prohibiting the amount the amount of money we can invest in the product that we're putting in the building. So it's become very hard to run those shows in London, and we still do, and we still want to continue to do so. But from I'm a grown up now, and we have to make this make sense financially, which is why we can't do as much in London as we would have liked to, just purely because the economics of it don't add up. if you've got to be, I mean, I remember speaking to a London promoter who shall remain nameless last year, and he was saying, we're kind of figuring out this wrestling thing now. We're nearly breaking even. And I was like, hang on a minute, was your last show not sold out? So to be able to be in a situation whereby you're selling out a show and not breaking even, it tells you all you need to know about kind of the cost of running these events. And it's very much a labor of love, but obviously our thing is about consistency and wanting to kind of continue to push the boundaries of what we can achieve, and wanting to have a full-time schedule and wanting to be able to be running shows every single weekend and just continue to grow. I'm sure last time we spoke, I spoke about the sustainable growth which RevPro has been undertaking since day one, and we've continued with that philosophy, we've continued with that mindset. So that's why it's so important to open new avenues and go to new venues and go to new areas. And that's why, I always talk about wanting to visit new towns, even new countries, in order to continue to grow. And that's not forgetting the areas we currently service, because we want to still be going into those places. So yeah, that's it basically. And obviously, the more venues you run, the more venues you run sustainably, the more secure you are for your future. As we found out, just about 6 weeks ago, when we found out that we were going to be unable to continue running shows at the 229, which has been our monthly home since the pandemic. It's a crazy thing about this professional wrestling, is that so often you get comfortable, and then just when you think everything's going to go right, the carpet's pulled from underneath you, and it's almost that case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So that experience taught me more than anything that we need to have as many ducks in a row, as many plan B, C and D's as possible. And yeah, so that's why it was, I guess for me, so important to be able to open up that door to Wolverhampton as a new venue. And then the venue have been nothing but wonderful to work with, and it's something that we hope we can continue. And obviously since that point, we ran our Summer Sizzler event there just a couple of weeks ago. We'll be going back there in October for Fantastica Mania UK 2025. So it's hopefully going to be a good venue for us. In terms of, I guess, you're looking at narratives being started, which have led us on to where we are now with the anniversary show. I'd probably date back to Uprising last year as really the start point, the catalyst for everything that has led towards the anniversary show. Maybe even Global Wars, actually, last October. I think that possibly could have been seen as a starting point, because you had Hiroshi Tanahashi labeling Leon Slater and Zosiah as the future of this business, Michael Oku defeating Ricky Knight Jr. in the #1 contenders match for the British Heavyweight Championship, which then obviously led to Michael Oku regaining that undisputed British Heavyweight Championship from Luke Jacobs in October. And you had Kanji, like a real coming out party, if you will, for Kanji, when she went one-on-one with Azumi and showed the wrestling world what she's all about. And of course, Mina Shirakawa defended her championship on that show as well, which led to her Uprising rematch with Dani Luna, which then ran into the first appearance on a RevPro screen of Mercedes Moné, where she challenged Mina for that undisputed British Women's Championship at the Tokyo Dome. So I'd say Global Wars, Uprising, that was a catalyst, that was a starting point. Obviously, High Stakes was a continuation of that. And I think one of the great things about RevPro and what we've been able to do, especially over the last 12 to 18 months, is we're able to string all our shows together, and we've come up with a lot of different mechanisms to be able to do that. And one of them, of course, is our YouTube channel. We've been adding the RevPro recap, which in 5 to 10 minutes, you can find out what happened on the previous RevPro show, and there's a playlist, so you can literally watch them through in episodic order. At the top of all our shows now, we've got a previously on RevPro video, which plays to kind of give you in 2 minutes or less a little snapshot of what's been going on. And when you're looking at it like that, you can kind of see how the things all join together, all the parts join together. I do think if you want to follow, because I've always maintained you can come to our shows as a standalone show and you can enjoy it for what it is. but you can grow greater understanding, greater appreciation for what you're watching if you become a fan of the product, and you follow what's going on. There's one of our great fans, Dave the Mark. You may know him. He very he puts everything together through the eyes of a fan. He gets told no information. He goes to the shows. He enjoys it. He interprets it the way that he interprets it, and he's also a great resource as well because he keeps up with everything. So you can almost get an unbiased opinion of what's been going on and an unbiased viewpoint without being try to be steered in any particular direction. So that's also cool to look at as well. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you can pick up a RevPro show at any point and you could probably say this is a starting point for what's coming next, because something else we've been working on is making sure that every show is of consequence. So it doesn't matter, what the town, it doesn't matter how the show is branded, it's always of consequence. And there's always going to be storyline wrinkles in any one of the shows you go to see, and there's always going to be something which is going to mean something for a future show. So that's why I feel like that's where we've improved a lot. And I feel that maybe we don't get credit for that, and that's absolutely fine. But I feel like if the evidence is there for you to kind of to look at and see. And I think that's like I say, I feel like this is one of our strongest years yet. And I feel like if you look at the business that we've done since over the last 12 months or so, the numbers don't lie. We've got two main metrics. Those main metrics being the tickets we sell and our on-demand subscribers. And in both those cases, those numbers have shown growth. So that's the only metric that really matters. Comparing ourselves to where we were yesterday, and all signs point to a very, very positive rest of the year ahead.
Great. Yeah, we'll see many of the big shows from the schedule going to outside of London, which in a sense is pretty cool too, because it also allows fans from other parts of the UK to go to those shows. And we also had High Stakes returning to the Doncaster Dome, which is another iconic venue in British wrestling. And we had many big matches. RKJ also gaining momentum, defeating Dijak. We had a future bout between Leon Cage and Nino Bryan. I believe that we will revisit that in some years in the future. We had Daniel Luna winning the women's gauntlet, which was another really cool match. We had JJL winning the scramble. We had Michael Oku and Leo Slater having a banger that they will revisit in a few weeks. And we had the long-awaited moment for fans, which was Mercedes Moné making her RevPro debut. She wrestled Kanji. It was a very good match. Also, Kanji showed once again that she's ready for a bigger stage, maybe. And how was it like returning to Doncaster Dome so soon? And what were your impressions of the show?
So I love the Doncaster Dome as a venue. I've got a lot of fond memories from it from my times as a referee, when I refereed for the original incarnation of 1PW. I don't think the quality of the venue has ever really been in question. So it was great coming to Doncaster Dome, and the atmosphere was fantastic. And yeah, thinking of that show, I just really enjoyed the show. I think from top to bottom, one of the things I pride myself on is being able to deliver a little bit of everything on our shows. Of course, look, you're always going to look back at shows and feel like there's, something didn't go the way you envisaged, or there's something that you would change upon reflection. But that's the benefit of hindsight, right? And that's, we always want to learn from our, we can't just have the mindset that everything we do is perfect, right? So of course there's some little niggles that I would have changed, but on the whole, the way we kind of look at a show is, again, from a business perspective, was it successful? Yes, it was. And then we look at it from, the show perspective. Have we delivered a little bit of everything? Did the fans leave entertained? Did the fans leave having enjoyed themselves? And the answer was a resounding yes. So it was another great show. And one thing that I want to stress as well is when you've got a roster, I've said it time and time again, but I believe the level of talent that we have right now, I think this is the deepest roster that we've ever had. And I feel that, honestly, and that's on all levels, and that's from the top of the card right the way through to the guys breaking through, you know, who are still learning their craft, so to speak. I feel like we've had times when we've had more star power up and down the card, but I think that will come with time. And I genuinely believe that we've never had a more talented crew. And I think that when you've got a roster which is as good and as talented as that, and you know, it makes my job a lot easier. And all I've got to do is put the people in the right scenarios to shine. And I take none of the credit for their ability to do that, you know. So I'm just... it's a joy, you know. It's a joy. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm here because I'm a fan of professional wrestling, and it's an absolute joy to be able to present a product that me myself as a fan would want to go and see and would look forward to, and you know, would come up with all the different scenarios about where could we go from here, or what's going to be next, you know. And that's what makes me happy. That's what makes me proud, because that's why I got into it in the first place. And again, I'm sure we spoke in the previous interview, and apologies if we didn't, but like, you know, when I got into wrestling, my whole mindset was trying to create a product that I could take my friends to and not be ashamed by, and know that I could convert non-wrestling fans into fans. And I genuinely believe that's what we're doing. And I think that show was no different. And of course, it was an absolute thrill it was surreal, but it was an absolute thrill to be able to work with Mercedes Monet. And I'm sure you'll probably ask some more questions about her later, but nothing but a positive experience. And it was, as you say, it was a moment which so many fans have been waiting for. And it was a moment that so many people said would never happen. And it did happen, and it was great. So yeah, just what a night. And we will remember it for a long time to come. And I think a sign of how far we've come is that when we first started, nights like that, that's what we'd be dining off for a year. We'd be talking about, do you remember High Stakes? Do you remember High Stakes? But look, High Stakes has happened in April, and we're already saying, do you remember Summer Sizzler? Which happened a couple of weeks ago. And then in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to say, do you remember the anniversary show? And I just feel these times shouldn't be taken for granted, because it's just a crazy, crazy time when we're able to deliver with such consistency on such a regular basis and on such a high level.
Yes, totally agree on that. And in that sense, I want to do another questions about Monet, since you mentioned it. It's also related to the partnerships that RevPro has. Mercedes Monet defeated Mina Shirakawa at the Tokyo Dome. It was a double title match at Wrestle Dynasty. And it was the first time that the RevPro Undisputed Women's Championship was defended in Japan. And in the Tokyo Dome, the most iconic venue in Japan, and one of the most iconic venues in the world. So how did that become a reality? And if it's possible to know, how hard has it been for RevPro to deal with Mercedes' schedule? Because like you mentioned, many people saw that, man, maybe this is not going to happen, because she's one of the biggest stars in pro wrestling, not only women's wrestling, but in general.
So it's been a long time in the making. The original conversations actually happened ahead of the 11-year anniversary show. Of course, our first show at the Copper Box. And of course, it was realistically, it was a possibility of that happening that gave me the confidence to run the Copper Box to begin with. So I guess we've got Mercedes to thank in more ways than one. Of course, fate had other ideas, because Mercedes would get injured and then was out for a very long period of time. You know, the timing of it perhaps worked out again, because it enabled us to then level up again after we've already, you know, achieved the Copper Box on 2 separate occasions, and know that we can do it and know that we're capable of doing it. I guess regarding the Women's Championship, regarding the Tokyo Dome, I think you'd probably be looking at I can't, again, off the top of my head, I can't give you an exact time scale, but I guess we'd kind of had kind of little discussions like, would you be interested in, could it happen? I genuinely thought that once Mercedes had signed with AEW, obviously, which is where she made her return, I just thought that it wasn't going to be possible to happen again because, Mercedes is one of AEW's biggest stars, and if knowing the history of professional wrestling, when does a promoter let one of their biggest stars go out and work other dates and help other people and help the industry? But I think one of the big positives about AEW, one of the big positives about Tony Khan and Tony Khan's mindset is that he knows for his product to flourish, there has to be an industry around him. Because where else are the talent going to get reps in, and where else is he going to find new talent? And you can't just play a game of tennis between AEW and WWE as to who's got what talent. So his mindset, which is so refreshing, is that obviously he everything has to be approved and everything has to go through AEW. But I guess the mindset is if it's people who do good business, reputable promoters who do things the right way, he's open to business. It was somewhat of a shock when I even found out that it would be a possibility to make it happen. So yeah, and I want to say, look, it was, the first time I guess the reopened conversation may have been the day after the anniversary show last year, where I actually met Mercedes advocate Kevin Underago for the first time, and I obviously haven't spoken to him a lot recently, but I met him in person after the Wembley show last year. And I guess that, he then expressed that Mercedes would still be interested in doing stuff. And I guess the conversation kind of started there. Yeah, and then just one thing led to another. And that's kind of what led us to the Tokyo Dome. And obviously having the relations with New Japan Pro Wrestling helped open the door for the championship defense to happen at the Tokyo Dome, which of course was an absolute honor to be able to do, and something that I feel is just so huge for our women's championship and so huge for our women's division as well, because anyone who's followed the British Heavyweight Championship will know, we say it's the most prestigious championship in the whole of independent professional wrestling, and I absolutely will die on that hill. It's a championship which has been defended in the Tokyo Dome, it's been defended in Madison Square Garden, it's been defended in Arena Mexico. Its track record speaks for itself, and of course the historic venues in the UK, York Hall, Bethnal Green, Copper Box Arena, Crystal Palace National Sports Centre, that belt's been defended in so many historic locations, and we want the same for our women's championship. So for that to happen on that stage, for it to be a double championship match, and for it to feature two huge stars, the caliber of Mina Shirakawa and Mercedes Moné, it was huge for us. It really was. And look, I want to kind of give a big shout out to Mina at this stage as well, and say that Mina also did a huge job of elevating the championship and putting more eyeballs on the championship, because she took those championship belts wherever she went as well. So it's been huge, and it's kind of only, I think that what it does is it kind of it opens the imagination of what's possible to achieve, and it gives our women's roster more things to aim for, more things to get excited about, and that's what all our international partnerships do. And then we've seen some of our women representing us in CMLL in Mexico. We saw Alex Windsor representing RevPro, Amira Blair, Zoe Lucas. We're going to see more representation from our women in CMLL as well in the future. And I just think it's great that we're able to do that. And stuff like that is only going to help the growth of the women's division, not just in Revolution Pro Wrestling, but women's wrestling in this country as well. So when I say this, I don't take it lightly, but Mercedes, and I'm not, again, I appreciate there seems to be it's insane. Like, and Mercedes is just this unique individual because she's able to take everything seemingly in her stride. But I've never seen someone who's such a polarizing figure, who has done nothing but try to spread the word of professional wrestling, who's done nothing but try to elevate professional wrestling, not just for herself, but others around her, who has been completely selfless in doing so, in terms of, look, she took a bet on herself, she took a bet on professional wrestling, and she's achieving everything that she said she was going to do. This is legacy defining stuff that she's doing right now, and yet there still seems to be pockets of people who want to hate on her for it, and I just think it's crazy. I'm someone who sees all the metrics. I'm someone who sees the effect on the business that Mercedes Moné has. And I'm someone who sees what she brings to a locker room. I'm someone who sees the morale that she brings to the locker room, the boost that she brings to the locker room, how excited everyone is when Mercedes Moné is around, and the effect that it has on the, look, she's done 2 matches for us. And in both instances, she's helped to elevate the profile of her opponent. And that is what Mercedes Moné is all about. And that's why she's going to be remembered kindly in history. And like I say, I just find it shocking that people who profess to love the sport of professional wrestling can say negative things about her, And look, I get it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But all I can speak for is actual first-hand, real-life experience. And all I can say is nothing but positives.
Thank you for sharing all that. I believe there's information that many people didn't know about how was the process. And of course, the timing of injury was unfortunate in a sense, but also, like you mentioned, maybe this was the right timing for her to be the face of the women's division and also help elevate the women's championship to the world. I also agree with you on this last part that Mercedes has been doing, in my opinion, a great job on elevating new talent, or maybe talent that is not as known for people on the other side of the ocean. And also she's been working not only bigger indies like RevPro, she's been doing smaller promotions. We've seen her in Poland, in Denmark, in the US also in smaller promotions. So I think that's really cool because, like you mentioned, and also it helps a lot that Tony Khan has been very open for his talent to work independent dates, that you don't see that often big stars from television working on indie shows. So that also helps the fan to get closer and have the possibility to watch live their favorite wrestlers from TV. So that's also really cool. And finally, I would also like to give a shout out to Mina Shirakawa. I also believe that she did a great job. I would say even an amazing job, because she was always bringing her titles. There was not a single Stardom show in Japan where she didn't have both belts. It's hard to have one belt, but she carried both. So that's also something to highlight. And then returning to RevPro schedule, we saw RevPro return to Barcelona in May. You ran a show with Rebellion. And this time there were more Spanish wrestlers on the show, some that we have seen before, but some new also. And we had a surprise defense between the Young Guns and Sokusaya. What were your impressions of that show, and what do you think you learned from the previous year?
I don't think there was any revelations in Barcelona this time around. Zazaya, God knows where he came from, but yeah, he's like a once in a lifetime talent, I believe. And I think that his future, he's pegged for huge things in his future, and I'm just glad that we've been able to be a big part of the let's say early development in his professional wrestling career. And I think it's insane when you look at the body of work that he's compiled over the last 18 months since debuting with us. It's crazy, including, I have to give a shout out again to that Iron Man match with Zazaya and Leon Slater. And look, for me, we'll get back into Barcelona for a second, but just while I think about it, I read everything. I saw everything in the lead up to that Uprising match where people were slagging that hour Iron Man match off before it happened. I saw it all. I saw people actively discouraging people from purchasing tickets to the show because they didn't feel that the card was strong enough, and they felt that the hour Iron Man match wasn't going to captivate them, right? And I guess, look, a part of that's on my shoulders. Perhaps I didn't do a good enough job of selling it to the people, but all I will remember is the reaction after that match when people realized, hey, this was a real deal. This was one of the greatest matches that we're probably ever going to see live. And I saw people tweeting saying, I wish I'd come to this show now, you know? And yeah, like Dave Meltzer famously put that tweet out just before the show saying, and I actually don't think Dave has ever put his money where his mouth is and actually watched that match either. So I'm calling you out, Dave Meltzer. You need to watch this Iron Man match between Leon Slater and Josiah. I appreciate there's a lot of product, but this was one of the all-time great matches, in my opinion, between two of the youngest stars in our business, you know. But you know, it was most definitely feast at York Hall Bethnal Green, and everyone who was there were rewarded for their faith in Revolution Pro Wrestling, their faith in the product, their faith in Leon Slater and Josiah, because it was just a special night and it was a special match. And I think it's one of those cases of, you know, all those people, like there's just so many people I just remember who were just like, oh wow, you know, that was great, you know, who weren't expecting it to be so. Yeah, and I think it just blew everyone's expectations away. But not mine, because I knew, you know, exactly how it would wind up. And it was fantastic. And yeah, so back to Barcelona, I don't believe that Josiah's like lightning in a bottle, isn't he? You know, we're not gonna recapture that twice, you know, but what I did experience was the same thing I experienced the first time round, which was the passion of the fans, which was the passion of the wrestlers, and they're all really trying to grow something from grassroots up. And I felt that passion, and I loved it. And I think there's so much great talent in Barcelona, and I think that, you know, all that separates them from growth in terms of the talent is just being able to get their reps in, being able to work with top guys on a more consistent and a more regular basis. But I felt that passion, I promise you I did. And that's why, you know, we were going to go back. We're always going to go back in September. But, you know, I made the decision on the night that we were going back for 2 nights and we were going to put our Trios Grand Prix there, because I just love the energy, I love the atmosphere, I love the passion, and I want to be able to do as much as I can, you know, my own little way to help that wrestling scene, and then kind of help the growth of the independent wrestling scene anywhere in the world. I love it, and I feel like being around that environment, it's great. It's great for me, it's great for our wrestlers, because it reminds you why you fell in love with wrestling in the first place, because there's a real purity about people who are getting into the business early doors. And there's a real purity about, I guess, people who haven't been jaded by the business yet, people who still remember it's a dream. Because that's one of the things that happens with professional wrestling that I've noted throughout the years, is everyone starts in professional wrestling because it's something that they've dreamed of as a child. I know, like, obviously, there's WWE's Neil program now, which has shaken that up a little bit. And I think that's great, by the way. I think that their program is great. And I feel that if they can cultivate from athletes and independent wrestlers and get a combination of both, they get a best of both worlds. So, you know, I feel that that's great. But aside from that program, you know, everyone who gets into professional wrestling because they're a fan of professional wrestling, because they've dared to dream, because they want to be pro wrestlers, not because it's something that they've gone to a job fair and someone at a job fair is like, oh, have you ever thought about becoming a pro wrestler? Right? No one, that doesn't happen in schools, you know? So when people first get involved, that's their mindset. They're dreaming. They don't take any moment for granted. And I think that as you get closer to that dream becoming a reality, you know, that's when, you know, you can start to become a little bit jaded, because the closer you get, the more it hurts. You know, the closer you get to a contract, or you see your peers achieving those contracts or achieving those goals, you know, and it feels like a labor of love, but a love which is lost, you know, and I feel that we constantly need reminders of how lucky we are. And I think that when we go to, you know, places like Barcelona and we see just the purity, the love for professional wrestling from the fans, from the roster, from the trainees, from the people that help behind the scenes, it lights a fire in your belly again, because you remember. And I think that we could all do with a dose of that, you know, even as fans, you know, because I think that the biggest likeness to this I can give you is in COVID, right? So before COVID, everything was taken away from us. So we took everything for granted, right? So before everything was taken away from us, we took everything for granted. We took professional wrestling for granted. I remember doing interviews where basically I was talking about, for example, New Japan talent. You know, at the time when we first started bringing New Japan talent over, dating back to 2013, Jushin Liger, When Thunder Strike, our first ever show we ran at York Hall, people couldn't believe it. It was such a huge deal. Then we brought over Tanahashi, Nakamura, Okada, Suzuki, Shibata. When those guys came over for the first time, people couldn't believe it. But then we've almost got to a phase just before COVID where it's like, Suzuki's coming over again. I've seen him before. I can always see him next time he comes over, right? And it was taken for granted. And then everything was taken away from us like that, boom. And over that course of about 18 months where everything was shut down and we couldn't go to live shows, it was no longer taken for granted. And people came back to those shows with a passion. And this is not just the wrestlers, this is the fans as well. This is the people behind the scenes as well. Everyone came back rejuvenated with a passion, with an energy second to none. And I feel that we've almost got ourselves back into that habit of taking everything for granted again, because it's just amazing. The human's mind, or the ability of a human's mind to block out the painful feelings, to block out the negativity, to block out, that feeling of helplessness, for example, during COVID, is crazy. We focus on the good thing. I guess it's a coping mechanism, right? We focus on the good things. We forget about the pain and we forget about the hurt and etc. So that's why it becomes a lot easier to take things for granted. And I think that every now and again, we need that reminder. And I think that going into these new territories and meeting these young wrestlers, that serves as a great reminder for us, and it's great as well because all the guys get to go away together. It's a nice bit of team bonding as well. Everyone gets to know each other a little bit better. It's great. It's a great opportunity for everyone to get pumped up about pro wrestling again. So I feel that these shows, they serve a number of masters, and not taking professional wrestling for granted is a big one of them.
Go with them to a different place, knew the place because I saw many people that went to last May Barcelona for the show with Rebellion, and they had a really good time. There were some big matches that have never seen before in the UK. So there are things that you might miss if you don't experience that. And also with that, I will like to disagree because in my case, at least, when RevPro announced the match between Leon and Susaya at Uprising, the Ironman match, that was what made me book my flight to London that time, because that's the kind of that.
Yeah, so I feel that there are fans that appreciate it. There are fans that were excited about it, and there are fans who wanted to be a part of history, right? And there was probably a more positivity than negativity, but it's the negative voices that are the loudest. And what I found recently as well is these negative voices, they tend to amplify a lot. And I've had to get used to, like I say, listening to the real metrics, which are obviously the ticket sales, which are the on-demand subscriptions, and the live reaction at the shows, right? And I just feel like it's very easy to look at, and I like I say, I appreciate that it's a vocal minority, but it's when that vocal minority gets amplified that it makes it tough. And when you're doing this and it's an absolute passion, and you seeing people saying, so just approaching something negatively. So they approach something negatively before they've even seen it. They form their opinion before the finished product, right? And obviously, look, like I say, everyone's well within their rights to have that opinion. But when I see that negativity then affecting other people's opinion, who may not have an opinion one way or the other, I'm just like, oh, come on, we're doing this in good faith, and we've only ever done it in good faith, and we're trying to build something here. And and look, Leon and Cesare both saw it as well, right? And I think that motivated them even further to deliver, and it did. But but I feel like I don't know. It's just one of those things. I feel like a rule of thumb. It's just like I say. It's a bit of a bugbear at the moment. You know, I see it a lot. And that was the first big example of it for me. That was the first time when I saw a vocal minority trying to talk other fans out of the building, so to speak, right? And like I say, I see it all the time. It's becoming more and more common recently, and I don't want to kind of feel like I'm moaning or whatever have you, but it's just tough when you see it and you work so hard at something and then all you see is moaning around you, negativity around you, and it's just like, when have we not delivered? Look, here's a big example for you. Ricky Knight Jr. versus Michael Oku, right? Their first match at Global Wars, absolutely fantastic. Their next match at Wolverhampton, absolutely fantastic, right? People seem to have made their mind up about Ricky Knight Jr. based on some baseless facts, without context, right? And the accusation is always louder than the apology. And I think that so many people have used that to decide that Ricky Knight Jr. is not a good wrestler, and have used that to decide, for people to have made their minds up already as to what a match is, right? And going into the Summer Sizzler show, there was negativity around the Michael Oku and Ricky Knight Jr. match. Just listen to the reaction in the building on the night. Look at what happened, right? I saw people actively hate tweeting about the match before it happened, and then writing, "Oh my God, this is actually good," as if it's a surprise, right? And I'm seeing the same stuff again about Ricky Knight Jr. and Charles Samuels, and which obviously is going to be the feature of our anniversary show. And again, it's just one of those things where people have an agenda, and just the negative voices are amplified. And I just think it's a shame, I just remember a day where you'll just go to a show with an open mind and see what happens, and then form your opinion afterwards. Professional wrestling, what we're painting, the stories we're painting, the stories we're telling, the heels are going to do things that you don't agree with. That's part of the story. Wrestling's an art form. Wrestling's drama. And when I was growing up, wrestling's all about the fight between good and evil, and wanting to see good overcoming evil. It's like any form of theatre, any form of drama, and that's the purest form of professional wrestling. And that's everything we do is with the best intention. We never go out to offend anyone. And if we do, we can only apologise if it offends someone. We can only apologise if it makes someone feel uncomfortable. But it's not our intention. It's not something that we deliberately go out to do. And it's not something we deliberately go out to achieve. All we want is for people to come out and have a good time. Will we make mistakes along the way? Yes, we will. Is anyone perfect? No, they're not. Will we learn from mistakes we make? Yes, we will. And I think that that's the only standard that people can be judged on, and I think that that's just so important to remember, that we are all human. We all make mistakes, and a part of being human is learning from those mistakes and building upon them, right? And I just don't feel that we should always have that mentality that we're out there to see what we can get away with. We're out there to upset as many people as possible. We don't care how people feel, etc. Of course we care. And our primary objective is to entertain the people. And that's all it's ever been, to entertain and to bring, these experiences, which forever seemed like they'd be impossible for people to experience, to bring them to people's local towns, to let you sit up close and personal to the action, to provide opportunities to meet talent you'd never get the opportunity to see before, to provide opportunity to see wrestlers in their prime. Not like, when I grew up, we were lucky. It's almost like we'd be lucky to see the WWE wrestlers, WWF at the time, on their tour around the UK, but it would be when they were no longer in their prime, and they'd just be doing a greatest hits tour, and we are bringing the best wrestlers in the world to local arenas. And, we're doing it at the most affordable prices we can get, but again, we'll do it, and we'll put there's an economy of scale to everything we do, right? And we have to run in a sustainable fashion. And there'll be people who will critique a show, for example, based upon the top price ticket, and we always make sure that there's an affordable point of entry to the shows, always, right? And when a show doesn't do well, we will never, ever go and discount tickets to try and get more numbers through the door, because we feel it's unfair on the people who were loyal enough to purchase the tickets in the first place. But again, the narrative is then like, oh, this show's so expensive, this show's not worth the money. But that's coming from people who either weren't going to attend already or aren't attending now, right? And they're not looking at the entry price, the price of entry. We do everything we can when we do weekenders, when we do 2 shows, we do 2 show tickets with huge savings. And our whole mentality is it's almost like it feels like there's I'm not I feel like this could be construed as me attacking, but I'm not. I promise you I'm not. I appreciate so all of our great fans, and I appreciate anyone who and I feel it a privilege that anyone would want to spend even a single penny on us and what we do. And I think that if you look at where we started to where we are now, I kind of have to pinch myself to see where we've got to and what we've achieved, and the fact that people are willing to invest their hard-earned money on what we see, what we do, and that in and of itself gives people the right to their opinion. And like I say, I'm not having a go. It's absolutely fine to have that mindset. However, I would like to try and change that mindset. I would like to try and walk us back into a world where we approach everything with an open mind. And I see people, like I say, like there's just this. There's just this false narrative that we charge tons of money for tickets. And look, yes, a front row ticket is expensive at our big shows, but where else can you sit front row for that price and see the caliber of talent that we are giving you? And anyone who's been to, for example, our 2 previous Mercedes shows, they essentially got a free meet and greet with Mercedes after the matches. So like, how much would you pay for that opportunity? Right. So this is a type of thing that's frustrating when all we're trying to do is provide positivity. All we're trying to do is help. All we're trying to do is produce just honest professional wrestling. No agenda, no reading into anything. Right. And it's hard. And I see the effect that some of the comments has. And I feel like, the reason why I sit here and I say this, right, is because, look, just have at me, whatever, right? I feel like I will protect my talent, and I will, maybe it's a mistake, I don't know, but I will take all the heat, I will stand in front of them and I will try and shield them from it as much as possible, because ultimately I will only try to do what's right. People write tons of stuff about them, unwarranted stuff, and it doesn't just affect that individual as well. It affects people who are on the shows, who see it and see the effect it has on those people, and they desperately want to say anything. They desperately want to say something. And they'll say to me, can we say so? Can we speak on this? And I'll say, I just don't really advise it, because the storm that it will create. And here I am creating that storm for my own back. But I hope you can see, as I've kind of spoken here, and look, it'll be easier for me just to not even, like, I think if anything, you've not led me onto this conversation. I think that I've led myself to this situation where I'm kind of explaining this out loud verbally, and I think that this is probably a mistake, me doing this, but I will always stand by my principles, even if it means standing alone. Ultimately, all I want to do is produce good wrestling shows, and all I want to do is provide value for money. All I want to do is provide shows that me, myself, as a child would have only dreamed of being able to see. There's no ulterior motive. I'm not in it for money. If I was, I'd be in a different profession. So yeah, that's it really. I'm sorry for going off on a bit of a tangent, but hopefully everything I've said makes sense. And I want to stress again, this isn't directed at the majority of our fans who go into everything with an open mind, who go into it with positivity, who go into it following the stories and wanting to see what happens. And and if a match isn't good, it's not good. That's fine. Feel free to voice your opinion about it, but after you've seen it, and give your reasons why. not just because you hate wrestler X, Y, and Z. And I do think it's quite interesting that a lot of the more unpopular wrestlers are the heels as well.
Yeah, I also seen a lot of negativity, especially recently with Ricky and now with Shaw, winning the Rumble and now being headlining the anniversary show in a title versus career match. So yeah, I know it's hard, and I know firsthand too that affects the morale of the locker room, because many people forget that wrestlers are characters. There's always real people behind those characters. They have their own feelings, their own worries, their own families. And one tweet can hurt a lot. People don't understand that. So it's really hard. But like you mentioned, it's not the majority who is that negative. And also before they even see the action, they even see the show. So hopefully that can start changing little by little. Then returning to RevPro schedule, we went to June and we had two big events. We had the British J Cup and the Revolution Rumble. Both events, had consequences for what we are seeing right now, and we will be seeing at the anniversary show. First, Nino Bryan won the British J Cup, and it was a tournament. It was a lineup featuring some veterans and some younger upcoming talent. But in the end, it was Nino who won the match, and then he challenged Will Caven, winning the title at Revolution Rumble. And at Revolution Rumble, we also saw Shaw Samuels, like we just mentioned before, winning the Rumble and getting his ticket to a championship match that now we know it will be a title versus career match at the anniversary show. So how did you feel at those two shows in June?
I thought it was great. So I feel like so the British J Cup's an interesting one, because I feel like sometimes we've got it right and sometimes we've got it wrong. And let me explain that statement. Is essentially with the J Cup, because it's junior heavyweights and it's the cruiserweight style of professional wrestling, a lot of the time the matches can be very samey. And I feel like with the first British J Cup, we absolutely knocked it out the park. And then I felt with the second one, we absolutely did not. Right. And as an example, and it's not to say, look, if you were to watch any of the matches in isolation from the second British J Cup, which was across 2 nights, which was the year that El Phantasmo won it. If you were to watch any of the matches in isolation, I genuinely believe they were all great matches, right? There was some real good stuff on those shows, right? However, if you were to watch them as complete shows, especially given the fact we did 2 nights instead of 1, I don't think it worked, because a lot of it was very samey from match to match to match. So my job as a promoter is obviously, and a matchmaker, is to try and I preach it harder than anyone, about a buffet of different styles of professional wrestling. And I didn't listen to my own advice, on a number of, a couple of the British J Cups. I just feel like, whilst they've been good shows, I just don't feel they've reached the high standards that I would have liked them to have achieved. And I feel like this year's absolutely did reach that standard. And obviously I felt like, the inclusion of, for example, your Adam Priest, fantastic addition to that. Chris Ridgway, obviously fantastic on that night. And I think that was almost like a Chris Ridgway is back, or Chris Ridgway is finally fulfilling his potential moment in that British J Cup. And of course, unfortunately, that preceded, a nasty injury for him that he's just kind of getting back from, getting ready to get back in the ring from. But I felt like on that night, we hit all cylinders in terms of, from the non-tournament matches, we had the excellent contest between Lizzie Evo and Serena Deeb. I feel like the show itself, it ticked all the boxes. And I feel that any time you have like a young underdog babyface stood tall in the middle of the ring and be surrounded and mobbed by children, you know you've done a good job. And that's it. That's the purity of professional wrestling that I spoke about earlier, you know. So I love that show. I think it did a real good job in setting things up and establishing Nino Bryant. And Nino Bryant, of course. So when I looked at it going into the summer, we were looking at our two fresh faces in the cruiserweight division being Leon Cage and Nino Bryant. And unfortunately, Leon Cage got injured. So it put a huge weight on the shoulders of Nino Bryant, a weight which would have perhaps been shared by the two of them. I thought it was fantastic. It showed me a lot about Nino Bryant and the type of wrestler he is and can be. And he seems to have taken it all in his stride as well. Of course, then going into Revolution Rumble, as you mentioned, and winning the undisputed British Cruiserweight Championship in another great moment and another great match against, I think, one of the unsung heroes of Revolution Pro Wrestling in Will Caven. And he's one of the people that gets a lot of unnecessary hate on the internet as well. If you look at Will Caven, look at his body of work as Cruiserweight Champion, look at his body of work since being in Revolution Pro Wrestling, and look at the where he is in his professional wrestling career in terms of how many years he's been doing this. Look, he's been doing it for years and years because he's been doing it since he was a child, right? He started off in our junior classes at the Portsmouth School of Wrestling, right? So he has been doing this for a long time. But in terms of breaking onto shows, this is like a post-COVID thing, you know, and he's not been doing this a long time. And if you look at the results that he's got, it's fantastic, right? And if he was a young babyface or was at the merchandise table or pandered to the fans in some way, I'm sure he wouldn't be getting the reaction that he gets. And I'm not talking about the reaction for, you know, the matches, because he gets a reaction for the matches, but I'm just talking about the unnecessary hatred he gets before he's even wrestled, right? And I just feel like if you look, like I say, you look at his matches. So for example, you look at Leon Cage's debut match in RevPro. Who was it against? It was against Will Caven, right? If Leon Cage and Will Caven didn't have the match they had, Leon Cage wouldn't have been back the next week, you know? Will Caven's capable of having those matches with people. He's an extremely talented wrestler. And, you know, when he works someone like Leo Rush and they have a great match and people decide they don't like it just because Will Caven was in it, it's insane. And you speak to someone like Leo Rush, who's a world-traveled veteran who will give his honest opinion, and they're happy and they can see the talent. You know, it's just tough, right? And I say that as again, I'm not jumping to Will Caven's defense here, but I say this as someone who's just looking at a young man who's breaking into professional wrestling and has had to learn to tune out that criticism on top of the pressure that he applies to himself before his matches. So yeah, and I feel like Will Caven, I said, like the biggest testament you can give to Will Caven is the reaction he got when he won the championship and the reaction he got when he lost the championship. That's how you can gauge if something's been a success, right? And again, people seem so tied up in the wrong type of heat, right? That's a justification behind many of the things that happen, right? But it might be the wrong type of heat for you because you've gone into it with that predisposition, right? But if you listen to the majority, not the minority, you'll understand the real reaction, right? So you know, I feel like I have to kind of stand up and defend Will Caven a little bit there because I think he was a fantastic cruiserweight champion, and I think that he is one of the stars that people look out for. He's not a quote unquote cool wrestler in terms of you know, he's not, you know, one of the favorites, and I don't think he ever will be because that's not the type of wrestler he wants to be. That's not what he's trying to be, right? But I just feel like, you know, we can at least give him credit where it's due, right? And if you want to pick apart his matches, go for it and objectively pick them apart. Do you know what I mean? But you've got to do it objectively, and you've got to do it whilst also looking at what he's brought to the table and the good matches and great matches that he's had as well. So there we are. Don't ever ask him to swing a steel chair though. He's not very good at that. But you know, I had to balance it out a little bit. But
Okay, then going into the Revolution Rumble, what are your impressions of that show?
I don't think people realize how hard it is to put together a Revolution Rumble. There's so many moving pieces. And if something doesn't work, it can then lead to that chain reaction of things not working. And look, I don't want to be too critical because I felt like I've watched back, obviously each year when we do it, I watch back the previous rumbles that we've done, and I actually think they actually hold up a lot because I also watch a lot of other rumbles as well in the lead up to it, just for inspiration, to see what they've done, to see what they've done right, to see what they've done wrong. And I actually think at the Revolution Rumbles we've done, I hold them up against any rumbles. So, but this year's, I thought there was, on the whole, I think it was very good. I know in my head there was one part in it where something was supposed to happen didn't happen, and then that led to a kind of chain reaction of events not happening when they should, and that created a bit of a lull for me. And that's for me knowing what was going to happen. So I'm not sure if that was the same for the fans watching at home, but I did think there was like a little section of the match where it kind of dipped a little bit. It did come back up at the end, and it's like stuff paid off. Like, so for example, the Liam Slater stuff, subbing for Leon and nearly winning the thing with the subtleness of the injury and coming back. I feel that definitely worked, and the reaction for Shah Samuels winning the Rumble was fantastic. So, and especially like I feel that Raw emotion took over because Jay Joshua is just absolutely fantastic. Jay Joshua's a future superstar. There's huge things coming for Jay Joshua, and I felt that, and same for Connor Mills as well, who were like the final three with him and Shah, and I feel that it was always a risk putting them in to get like together because I was like, the people are going to go for Mills or Jay because obviously they're, even though they're heels, they're cool wrestlers, right? They're wrestlers who are knocking at the door, and people can see they're knocking at the door, right? And I don't think that people have looked at Shah the way as a championship contender for some time now. And I think there's some fascinating conversations that you can see on our YouTube channel with Shah Samuels and Dave Bradshaw. And I did one with Shah Samuels as well, which by the time this is live, you'll be able to see for yourselves. And it's a fascinating look at Shah Samuels as the person, the wrestler, and kind of his mindset as well. But obviously when it happened, heard the reaction, I knew that it was the right decision because the crowd came unglued as Shah firstly eliminated Jay Joshua, and then the reaction for Liam coming back in, and then the switch reversal and Shah winning and everyone on their feet. It was fantastic. And sometimes it's nice for the underdog to win. Sometimes it's nice to kind of have those moments. And what I don't think people realize as well is that, as an independent professional wrestling promoter, it is very tough, right? We do not have our wrestlers tied to contracts, and there's a lot of moving pieces. So whenever we book long term, a lot of it is betting, and that's because we never know who's going to be available from one day to the next, or for future dates moving forward, or key dates. So I feel like that obviously needs to be taken into account when we're doing all this stuff as well. And there's lots of pivots had to be going on over recent weeks and months as well. But I feel like we've been able to do everything without missing a step, basically. And we always make the best out of these situations. Like we spoke earlier about Mercedes, not being able to come in when we'd originally planned, or when we originally hoped. There was no deal done, so to speak. We were close and hopeful and confident enough to then book that date, book that venue, but fate had other ideas, and it seems to have worked out long term, right? And I feel that's the same with everything we do. So we're always prepared to pivot, we're always prepared to move, and there's always moving pieces with everything we do. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges as a independent professional wrestling promoter. And especially, you hear rumblings of shake-ups are coming, and I'm sure in August when during the AEW week, I'm sure that would be an opportune time with the WWE UK tour at the same time, to find out what's happening next, what are the next steps. Like, I don't know anything, but I'm just saying, if I'm a betting man, the scene is very unstable. But obviously we create that stability by continuing to bring through great wrestlers. And I think the fact that we were able to have 30 people in a Rumble match and still have many more people that we could have added to that Rumble match is a testament to the depth of talent that we have here in RevPro right now. And it's a sign that, you know, all this future proofing we've done, all this hard work we've done, bringing talent through, and having a commitment to that and taking those risks on young talent, all of that seems to have paid off. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, I was happy with it. I'm my own biggest critic. I look back at stuff, I get frustrated by stuff that doesn't come off the way I'd like to, but then I'm excited when stuff does, you know, and I feel like that's just a part of being a creative person, that reflective process. And I think that as I've grown older, as I've matured, I've been able to do a better job of figuring this thing out about being fair on myself, being fair on the circumstances with the knowledge of context, and kind of looking at how stuff panned out. And then, you know, you always be like, why didn't we drill that bit one more time? Why didn't we go through this bit one more time? But, you know, you can only do so much stuff. And I feel that given what we have to work with and the you know, the infrastructure we have, I think that we did a very, very good job. And it wasn't like, as well, we took like time off before the Rumble to prepare for it. We were going, you know, full blast. I think it feels like we've been going full blast for a long while now, you know. And that was one of the times when I was getting to the end of the Rumble. I actually went on a holiday on the Tuesday after the Rumble, because I was just like, I am done. I need some time off. A weekend after, had no shows, so I went away on the Tuesday and then came back the following Friday ready to get back into the 229. But then 2 days into the holiday, obviously we found out we'd lost the 229, so that holiday was ruined as I was frantically calling people in the middle of the night my time to try and secure a new home. But that's the breaks. Like I say, that's independent wrestling for you. So yeah, it never stops. We keep moving.
Also, at the same time, we have been watching the Great British Tag League, the tournament kickoff earlier this year, and there was a lot of anticipation because the teams competing are either renowned teams or teams that are competing for the first time in Europe or in the UK specifically, and there are coming teams and also teams that have been featuring regularly in RevPro. But there was not that much clarity on when and where the tournament matches were going to take place. For example, we are seeing the Cowboy Way coming over for the Double Impact shows this weekend, and they are just making their debut in the tournament. And RevPro just announced that the finals of the tournament will be held on the August 23rd show, you know, second night of the anniversary. So how has been the booking process for the tournament for you?
So look, I guess this falls back into the being an independent promoter, you know, having no wrestlers contracted, no one tied down to dates, etc. So you have to get the balancing process correct between getting the right teams and their availability. And to me, you can look at it and go, well, everyone should have their matches in a sequential order, and that would be nice in an ideal world. But you look at it and it's like, well, so for example, Cowboy Way, Manda's he's just been in Japan. His shows in America this past weekend. His schedule didn't allow for this to work out. But obviously we wanted to use him and Shire as a tag team since we saw them together. Like I always remember the vision of, they were both on a 229 show in singles matches, and they did just before the epic encounter where Mandas works Michael Oku, and they did like a little double team on Michael Oku, and I was like, these guys, and I remember going across the road to Tesco's and just seeing these two real life cowboys walking through the aisles of Tesco's, and I was like, you know, this is a real tag team, and this is what I want to get behind. But like, look, they're busy guys, you know, so like we had to get this done in a time when their schedule allowed, and obviously to do it when we've got a weekend of shows, we get 2 matches done, they can stay the week, and then obviously their final tournament matches in Southampton. So it's kind of worked out in that way, right? And I'm sure if you were to say I could bring a team which wasn't Cowboy Way in, and look, we need to take away from it the fact the shows are in Germany, right? Because, you know, I've said to you, I think some people might look at it and go, well, why is the tournament, why are tournament matches happening in Germany, right? And my answer is the same as I told you earlier. We're trying to make sure that every show is of consequence, right? We're not going to Germany to do an exhibition show. We're not going to Barcelona to do an exhibition, or France to do an exhibition. You know, we want to put on a RevPro show, and we feel that obviously with our YouTube recaps, with our on-demand service, people are able to keep up to date with what's going on. There's something which I'll get to in a second, which I don't feel that we've done as well as we should have done. Again, talking about reflection and what we can do differently and what we can do better next time. But you know, look, my main thing is to ensure we get everything over the line. And that's something that I've always tried to do since day one. And I think, like, you know, being an ambitious promoter, some of the matches I've put together, some of the inter-promotional matches I've put together, you know, I think like I was knocking on the forbidden door before the forbidden door was even a phrase, you know. And if you look across historically over the years, some of the matches that I've made happen, just through pure persistence and stubbornness, you know, you will understand that my goal is, let's get these matches in the ring, let's make it happen, right? Now, there was one big curveball, which, look, I'm going to reveal it now for the first time, right? There was one big curveball happened. So I got back. So obviously, look, the tag league, we kind of look in phases, right? So the tag league, the finals are always going to happen at the anniversary show. In my head, it was always going to happen on night 2, right? Everyone's like, well, why would you not have night 1, the tag league finals, and night 2, the championship match? Well, first of all, the champions might be in the tag league finals. You don't know that yet. And second of all, this whole thing's about growing the division, right? It's not about blowing everything off in one night, right? So we have the tag league finals, and then we have a very clear number 1 contender to the undisputed British Tag Team Championships coming out of the anniversary shows, right? And I think that makes things more exciting. It keeps the division alive, and it gives us another big match to look forward to. And it keeps, like, so it's very much like we don't want the anniversary shows, we don't want any of our shows to be the end point, right? Because I feel like obviously some stories end, some just begin, and some continue, right? And I think that there's always that inclination, just because of the way we've been conditioned with American wrestling, as WrestleMania happens, and then the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania is just a hard reset and we start the next season, right? Whereas I feel, you know, we just keep going. It's episodic, right? Week after week after week. The stories, the rivalries continue. We don't forget, and everything means something. So for me, that's why it was very important to have, you know, the finals at the anniversary show, and make sure that throughout this tournament, there's wrinkles of stuff happening. There's wrinkles of stuff going on, which can lead to stuff in the future. You know, and you kind of got to be patient. I know in today's day and age, where you know, everyone wants it now. You kind of have to be patient if you want to see the payoff, right? So I've got no issue with the timing of all of that stuff. But the reality is, look, if I wanted to do the tag league, I wanted to put the finals on a stage, right? And the reality is, we've been looking to schedule. We couldn't get the scheduling to work last year, right? Which was, look, again, it's tough. We do not have TV. We do not have multiple shows every week. We are trying to serve a number of masters whilst trying to bring through young talent at the same time. And I think you find that whenever there's that focus on a division, it seems like another division can suffer. And without loading our matches with 10, 12 match cards, which economically isn't good and entertainment wise isn't good, because there'd just be a burnout, you know. So without loading our matches with those 12 match cards, it's very hard to kind of make sure that everything gets its place, right? So when you do tag league shows, when you do a tag league, you, by default, there are multiple shows where you have to have at least 2 tag league matches on the show, right? And then if you're looking at it and then going, well, then we need, We've got to look at our women's division, our cruiserweight division, our heavyweight picture, and then just young talent coming through. Right, so there's a lot of boxes we need to tick in very few spots. So we kind of had to make the decision last year that we weren't going to run the tag league because we weren't in a situation where we were comfortable that if we were to add those tag league matches to shows, what we'd have to take away to get there. Right, so but this year we're running more shows this year. It makes it a lot easier to do, but we wanted to make sure the finals were in an appropriate place. Right, and that appropriate place obviously is the 13-year anniversary show. But in order to do that, we had to fit in the matches in the time frame we have, mixing it with the availability of the wrestlers we have. And that's what we've done, and it's a tough task. And I made the task even tougher by announcing the blocks on jet lag and getting one of the teams in the wrong block. Right. And on all of this stuff, basically the idea was I was going to do the tag league while I was away. We were going to drip feed the tag league announcements. But then obviously when I woke up to the news that we'd lost the 229, the ability to drip feed the tag league announcements took second place to ensuring that we had a place to run monthly shows. And I'm sure that became business critical essentially, because if we didn't find a place to run monthly shows, I'm sure people... Do you know what I mean? What would you prefer? Would you prefer the tag league the way we've got it, or would you prefer, to have it in a more announced way with your fixture list and your, the teams drip fed, etc., but then not have a place to run our monthly show? So it's one of those things whereby, my task is spinning plates. And you can say like, well, why don't you get more help in? Why don't you get more people to help? Right. And again, it comes back to needing to run a sustainable business and people expecting a certain level of quality with what we're doing. We don't want to cut costs with anything we're doing. And therefore we have to build this one step at a time. So you'll notice that there has been, and I'll get back into this in a second with the tag league and what we would like to do, but there has been a significant improvement with what we're doing with our backstage reactions, our recaps, and like just everything you'll see like in terms of that social media presence. And that's because we've taken Andy Ward from Spinebuster Media, we've taken him on full time to take care of that stuff. But this is something that obviously has been a long time coming, and something we had to find ourselves in a position where we'd be able to kind of do something like that. And it's very much been a process. The reason we're starting to advertise it now because we've started to find our feet. But like when you're going through a process like this, it takes time to suss out each other's working styles. Mine's very different to most other people in the terms of like I'm a typical entrepreneur in the sense of like I just work random hours, whatever hours I can. But I also, I've got a son who's home educated, and I have to be with him twice a week, doing the home education with him. And then obviously, look, without going into personal details, the process of getting there was a long and drawn out process as well, which required a lot of time. I'm in the process of moving house. That's also taken up a lot of time. So do you know what I mean? All the different stuff piles on top of trying to run this business where I'm spinning plates left, right, and centre. So it takes a little while to kind of get used to working with each other, figuring out what's what, and the times we work, and etc. And I feel like we're finally finding our groove. We're finding our feet with that right now. But I think it's come a little bit too late for the Tag League, because what I'd like to have done is the event centre, the Tag League event centre. So if you watch our on demand of Live in London '98, you will see a Tag League event center going up before the tag league match on that VOD. You'll see the event center, which breaks down all the matches. It gives you a league table. It gives you everything that, it breaks everything down and what's still to come. And then following London, we put out on our socials the latest update, which is after that match. Which is preceding Berlin, and then following Berlin. Now, like I say, now we've got our groove together. Following Berlin, you'll get a breakdown as well. You'll get a recap of everything that's happened so far, where we are leading into the finals, what it means to the finals. When I say the finals, the final day, which is obviously going to take place in Southampton, and it's going to break down all the different scenarios of who needs to do what to win, going in to that final day. And then, of course, at the end of that final day, we'll have the clear breakdown, which will show you how the winners of each block got to where they needed to be, or if there needs to be a playoff. So everything will be, everything will come to light. And obviously, I appreciate the way it was rolled out wasn't an ideal, but we don't live in an ideal world. We deal with what's in front of us, and we deal with we have to, or I have to take responsibility for that. And, I can sit there and hold my hands up and say it wasn't exactly how we would have liked. Because even the scheduling of it is so hard as well. You put down all the different schedules, you put down the points and how you want it to go going into the fight. Like, it's hard work. It really is. And I feel like I say, the final piece of that puzzle is, that the event center, so to speak. And it'll be great, next year when we do it, we will have the event center. We will have the points on the match graphics. We will have a fixture list. We will have league tables, but it's a case of we will do now and get perfect later, because it's a case of, I'm sure we would, this is something that I say to a lot of people. It's something I say to Andy all the time with some of the stuff that, he's a perfectionist with a lot of the stuff he brings out. But I say, like, we don't have time to be a perfectionist on a lot of the stuff. And I just use the example of the iPhone. If Apple wanted to wait until something was perfect, they never would have brought out the iPhone 1, because God knows what number iPhone we're on right now, but they're still rolling out versions of iPhones, each better than the version before. And if they were waited until now, they would have missed out on millions and billions of dollars, and this iPhone that we know wouldn't even be a thing. And it's it's one of those things where we do now, we get perfect later. And but we try. There's no harm in that, because we're putting our best foot forward. We're doing our absolute best to make it happen. And in many ways, I take it as a compliment that people hold us to such a high standard as well, that people expect this of us, that people want to see this from us, because, people obviously do judge us on a standard alongside some of the biggest and best wrestling promotions in the world. We look at our production, and look, our production has improved so much, and it's still got ways to go, don't get me wrong, right? But our production since we last talked, our production has improved so much. And I believe that when we last talked, that was a big talking point about the production. And I said, we were improving things step by step. We're improving things, but we have to do it in a sustainable way, which means obviously owning the equipment and bringing stuff in. And I remember we had a spate of technical difficulties, which had nothing to do with us whatsoever. And again, I guess they did in the way that we can't afford a satellite truck, so we have to rely on the venue's internet connection. But there was one show where the venue of like, oh, we've got this new internet connection. You've got to, but you connect wirelessly to it now, but it's just for streaming and it's perfect. And we took their word for it, and it didn't work. And I was like, this isn't working. And they were like, I promise you it'll work, and it didn't work. So for the first half of the show, there was terrible internet. And we've got our workaround. They still insist, it's Southampton, by the way, and they still insist their internet connection is perfect for live streaming. But it went from a venue that we could live stream in using their connection, no problem whatsoever, to a venue that now we've had to figure the problem and get in a specific mobile router with loads of antennas and whatever have you, to make sure that we can get our streams working there. And then the next show, there was a cable stopped working, and you can't really foretell that stuff. It was working when we plugged it in. When we went to start the show, just stopped working. And it took trial by error to figure out what was wrong, but it was obviously as the show was going live. So what could we do? We could stop the show for the people who are there live and say, hang on, the live stream's going on, so it's just, so we get frustrating things all the time whereby sometimes we don't get what the results we need. But I don't think it can be argued that our production has improved significantly. We've upgraded the cameras, we've upgraded the sound. Like I said, there's still ways to go. I understand we're not perfect, but again, it's one of those things where with each show that goes on, we're learning, we're improving, and we're moving things forward. So yeah, it's like I say, it's one of those things. Is with the tag league, with everything we do, it's we do the best job we can. we learn from that job, we reflect upon that job, and we make sure that next time we do it better. And like you see with the tag league, we could have just left it as it is with nothing, but we were like, no, we need to do something, and now's the time to get it done. And that's where obviously the event center came in, and you could look at it and say it's too little too late perhaps, but we have got other things in place, such as the backstage comments, such as the RevPro recaps that enable you to keep up to date with everything that's going on. And like I say, we're just doing our best we can to keep moving forward. And I think that I think it's hard to argue if you look at the way where we were last year to where we are now. I feel like we've come on leaps and bounds in all aspects.
Okay, friends, that was all for today. See you next time.